Get
What
that
kind of
clipboard
person
out of my
demands you
face. You
move
have
your
no
boat
right to
from a
tell me what
dock
I
you
can
called
do
home
here.
for
According to
years,
these
without
documents, we
so much as a
absolutely
please?
do. This
The
is
sun
private
hung
property
low
now.
over Lake Serene, casting a golden sheen across the water, when Karen strode onto my dock like she owned it. Her voice cut through the evening's quiet, sharp as a knife, demanding I relocate my modest fishing boat because it cluttered the view. I stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at her pristine clipboard and the HOA badge pinned to her blazer. The lake lapped gently at the dock's edge, my boat bobbing like it was nodding in agreement with my disbelief. Did she even know who she was talking to? My name's Tom Carver, and I've lived on this lakefront for a decade, long before the HOA decided to turn our sleepy community into their personal fiefdom. Karen, with her perfectly manicured nails and self-righteous smirk, didn't wait for an answer. She handed me a violation notice, spun on her heels, and marched off, leaving me with a crumpled piece of paper and a simmering anger. I wasn't just some tenant she could bully. I owned my cabin, my dock, and, though I hadn't thought about it in years, maybe more than she could ever imagine. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, the violation notice glaring at me from the countertop. My coffee had gone cold, but my resolve hadn't. Karen's note cited HOA Regulation 17B, unauthorized dock obstructions, demanding I move my boat within 48 hours or face fines. Fines? For a boat I'd tied to that dock since I bought the place. I'd never cared much for the HOA's rules. Endless forms, petty restrictions, and nosy neighbors who'd report you for a crooked mailbox. But this was personal. I grabbed my phone and called my old friend, Mike, a lawyer who'd helped me with the property purchase years ago. His voice crackled through the line, cheerful but curious. "Tom, what's got you riled up at 8 in the morning?" I told him about Karen, the notice, and the HOA's latest power trip. He laughed, a deep, knowing chuckle. "You still got those property deeds handy?" he asked. I frowned, digging through a dusty file cabinet until I found the yellowed folder from the sale. As I read through the documents, my jaw dropped. The fine print wasn't just about my cabin or the dock. It mentioned lakefront rights and exclusive ownership of adjacent shoreline. Mike's voice grew serious. "Tom, you don't just own the dock. You might own the whole damn lakefront." I spent the day poring over the deeds, my heart racing with every line. The language was dense, but it was clear. When I bought the cabin, I'd inherited rights to the entire lakefront, a detail buried under years of dust and forgotten by everyone, except, apparently, the original seller. The HOA had no jurisdiction over my dock or the shoreline. Karen's violation notice was as toothless as a gummy bear. But instead of relief, I felt a spark of defiance. They wanted to play hardball? Fine, I'd play. I drove to the county records office, a squat building that smelled of old paper and bureaucracy, and requested every document tied to my property. The clerk, a bored woman with glasses perched on her nose, handed me a stack of files thicker than a phone book. Back home, I spread them across my dining table, piecing together a history I'd never fully understood. My land wasn't just a cabin and a dock. It was the heart of Lake Serene, a legacy from a time before the HOA even existed. Karen had no idea who she was messing with. By evening, I'd mapped out my plan. I wasn't going to just tell Karen she was wrong. I was going to make her eat that violation notice. The next HOA meeting was in 2 days, a perfect stage to set things straight. I called a few neighbors, old-timers like me who'd grumbled about the HOA's overreach for years. There was Sally, who'd been fined for her wildflower garden, and Jim, who'd gotten a warning for his unsightly vintage truck. They were in, eager for a chance to push back. As I hung up the phone, I glanced out my window at the lake, its surface calm, but hiding depths I was only beginning to understand. Karen thought she was the queen of this community, but she was about to learn the rules didn't apply to me. Not here, not on my lake. The morning of the HOA meeting, I woke to a strange sight. A new sign posted near my dock, bright red letters screaming, "Remove boat immediately. HOA order." Karen's doing, no doubt. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. I snapped a photo, printed out my property deeds, and headed to the community center. The meeting room was packed, the air thick with tension and cheap coffee. Karen sat at the front, her clipboard like a scepter, flanked by two other HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I took a seat in the back, my stack of documents tucked under my arm. As Karen droned on about mailbox uniformity and lawn maintenance, I felt the weight of the moment building. This wasn't just about my boat anymore. It was about every small freedom the HOA had chipped away from us. When she opened the floor for comments, I stood, my voice steady but loud enough to turn heads. "Karen, about that violation notice you gave me," all eyes were on me, and I knew this was just the beginning. The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes locked on me as I held up the crumpled violation notice. Karen's smile tightened, her fingers gripping her clipboard like a lifeline. "Mr. Carver," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "this isn't the place for personal disputes. File a formal appeal if you disagree." I didn't flinch. "This isn't a dispute, Karen. It's a fact. Your notice is invalid because I own the lakefront. All of it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen's eyes narrowed, but I pressed on, laying out the deeds on the table in front of her. "These documents prove my property includes the entire shoreline. Your HOA has no authority over my dock or my boat." The room erupted in whispers, neighbors glancing at each other, some nodding, others wide-eyed. Karen's face flushed, but she recovered quickly, her voice sharp. "That's absurd. The HOA governs all community property, including the lakefront. You're misinterpreting those papers." I smiled, calm but unyielding. "Then let's call the county assessor. They'll confirm it." Before Karen could respond, Jim stood up, his gravelly voice cutting through the tension. "Tom's not the only one fed up. You fine me for my truck, Karen, but it's parked on my land, not yours." Sally chimed in, her hands trembling with years of pent-up frustration. "In my garden. You called it a weed patch when it's the only thing keeping me sane." The room was alive now, voices overlapping, grievances spilling out like water from a cracked dam. Karen banged her gavel, but it did little to quell the uprising. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. For years, the HOA had ruled through intimidation, but now the room was turning, and I was the spark. I handed the deeds to Mike, who'd slipped into the meeting late, and he nodded, already pulling out his phone to call the county. "This'll be quick," he whispered. As we waited for the assessor's response, a twist hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen stood, her voice steady now, almost triumphant. "Even if your deeds are correct, Mr. Carver, there's a lien on your property. I checked the records myself. You owe back taxes from 2015, and the HOA can seize the lakefront if they're not paid." My stomach dropped. Back taxes? I'd never heard of any lien. Mike's brow furrowed, and he pulled me aside, his voice low. "She's bluffing, or someone screwed up. Let me dig into this." My confidence wavered. Had I missed something all these years? The room buzzed with speculation, and Karen seized the moment, addressing the crowd. "This is why we need rules, people. Without the HOA, you'd all be in chaos, just like Mr. Carver's delinquent taxes." The tide was shifting back to her, and I felt the ground slipping beneath me. Mike worked fast, his fingers flying over his phone as he accessed county records. I stood there, heart pounding, watching Karen bask in her temporary victory. The other board members nodded along, eager to regain control. But then Mike's face lit up. "Got it," he said, holding up his phone. "There's no lien, Tom. The county cleared it years ago. Clerical error. Karen's got nothing." Relief flooded me, but I kept my face neutral. This wasn't over. I stepped forward again, my voice louder now. "Karen, you're lying. There's no lien, and you know it. You're just trying to scare me into submission." The crowd gasped, and Karen's composure cracked, her eyes darting to the board members for support. They shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. Mike handed me a printed email from the county, confirming the lien's dismissal, and I held it high. "This is the truth. The HOA has been bullying us for too long, and it stops now." The meeting ended in chaos, with neighbors shouting questions and Karen struggling to regain order. I left the community center with Mike, Sally, and Jim, my heart still racing, but my resolve stronger than ever. Karen had tried to outmaneuver me with a fabricated lien, but she'd underestimated my resources and my neighbor's anger. As we walked back to my cabin, the lake glimmering under the moonlight, I knew the real fight was coming. Karen wasn't going to back down, and neither was I. The deeds were my shield, but the community's support was my sword. I'd spent years keeping to myself, fishing quietly on my dock, but now I was in the middle of a war I hadn't asked for, and I was ready. The next morning, the lake was still, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. I stood on my dock, staring at my boat, its hull gently bumping against the wood. Karen's red sign still stood, defiant, but I ripped it down, tossing it into the water where it floated like a warning of battles to come. My phone buzzed Mike with news. The county's sending an assessor tomorrow to verify your lakefront ownership. If it checks out, the HOA's done for. I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and hung up. The assessor's visit was my ace, but I knew Karen wouldn't wait quietly. She'd already tried to blindside me with that fake lien. What was next? I didn't have to wait long to find out. By noon, a tow truck rolled up to the dock, 2 men in coveralls stepping out with a work order. HOA says move the boat. One grunted, barely looking at me. I crossed my arms, standing my ground. You touch that boat, and you're trespassing on private property. They hesitated, glancing at each other, then left, the truck's engine rumbling as it retreated. That afternoon, I rallied Sally, Jim, and a few others at my cabin. We sat around my kitchen table, maps and deeds spread out like a war room. Sally's eyes sparkled with defiance. Karen's been calling everyone, saying you're a troublemaker, Tom. She's trying to turn the neighborhood against you. Jim snorted, leaning back in his chair. She's scared. She knows she's losing control. I nodded, but my mind was racing. Karen's tactics were escalating, and I needed to stay one step ahead. Then came the twist that hit us all like a thunderbolt. Sally's phone pinged with an email from the HOA forwarded to every resident. It was a petition to reclaim the lakefront for community use, claiming my ownership was a misunderstanding that threatened property values. Attached was a grainy photo of my boat, captioned, "One man's selfishness endangers us all." My blood ran cold. Karen wasn't just fighting me. She was weaponizing the community. I drove to the community center that evening, where Karen had called an emergency meeting. The room was packed, the air thick with tension. Karen stood at the front, her voice smooth as she spun her narrative. Mr. Carver's claims threaten our community's unity. The lakefront belongs to all of us, and we can't let one person hold it hostage. I felt eyes boring into me, some hostile, others uncertain. I stood, my voice calm but firm. Karen, you're twisting the truth. I have the deeds, and the county's confirming them tomorrow. This isn't about me. It's about your HOA overstepping its bounds. A few neighbors nodded, but others whispered, swayed by Karen's polished lies. Then Mike stepped forward, holding up his phone. I've got the county's preliminary report. Tom's deeds are legitimate. The HOA has no claim. The room erupted, some cheering, others shouting at Karen. She banged her gavel, her face pale, but the crowd was slipping from her grasp. As I left the meeting, I caught Karen's eye. For the first time, she looked shaken, her clipboard clutched like a shield. But I knew she wasn't done. The next morning, the assessor arrived, a wiry man named Greg with a clipboard of his own. He walked the shoreline with me, measuring, taking notes, and nodding as I showed him the deeds. "Looks solid," he said, squinting at the lake. "This'll shake things up." By afternoon, he'd filed his report, confirming my ownership of the entire lakefront. I should have felt triumphant, but Karen's petition loomed large. She was rallying neighbors, painting me as the villain. I needed to act fast. I called another meeting, not at the community center, but at my dock. I invited every neighbor, offering coffee and the truth. Dozens showed up, standing on the grass, the lake sparkling behind us. I laid out the deeds, the assessor's report, and my story. This isn't about keeping the lake to myself, I said. It's about stopping the HOA from controlling us all. Sally and Jim backed me up, sharing their own battles. Slowly, the crowd warmed, their anger turning from me to Karen. By dusk, the tide had turned. Neighbors who'd sided with Karen were now questioning her. The petition was losing steam, but I knew she'd have one last move. As I locked my cabin that night, I saw a figure by the dock, Karen, alone, staring at my boat. She didn't see me, but the look on her face wasn't defeat. It was calculation. I went to bed uneasy, the lake's quiet lapping no longer soothing. Tomorrow would be the showdown, and I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me. The morning of the final confrontation dawned gray, the lake shrouded in mist like it was holding its breath. I woke to a text from Sally. Check your dock. Now. I bolted outside, my heart sinking as I saw the damage. My boat was still there, but the ropes tying it to the dock were slashed, the hull scratched with deep, deliberate gouges. A note was pinned to the dock. Last warning, move it or lose it. Karen's handwriting, unmistakable from the violation notice. Rage surged through me, but I swallowed it. This was her desperate play, and I wouldn't let it break me. I called Mike, who arrived with a camera, documenting the vandalism. This is evidence, he said, his voice grim. She's crossed the line. I nodded, my jaw tight. The assessor's report was in, my ownership was ironclad, and now Karen had given me proof of her malice. The HOA's reign was about to crumble. I spent the morning rallying the neighbors again, this time with the damaged boat as my exhibit. Sally and Jim spread the word, and by noon, a crowd gathered at my dock. I showed them the slashed ropes, the scratched hull, and the note. Gasps and murmurs spread through the group. This is what the HOA does when you stand up to them, I said, holding up the note. Karen's not protecting our community. She's tearing it apart. The crowd's anger was palpable, their trust in the HOA eroding with every word. Then Karen arrived, her blazer crisp but her face strained. This is a setup, she declared, pointing at me. He damaged his own boat to frame me. The accusation hung in the air, bold and desperate. A few neighbors hesitated, but Sally stepped forward, her voice shaking with fury. We know your handwriting, Karen. You've been bullying us for years. This ends today. The confrontation escalated as more neighbors spoke out, their stories of fines, threats, and petty rules pouring out. Karen's composure cracked, her voice rising as she tried to deflect. I'm protecting property values. You people don't understand how much work the HOA does. But the crowd wasn't buying it. Mike held up the assessor's report, reading aloud the confirmation of my lakefront ownership. The HOA has no authority here, he said, and Karen's actions are criminal. The word criminal hit like a thunderclap. Karen's eyes widened, and for the first time, she had no comeback. The board members, who'd arrived with her, shifted uncomfortably, distancing themselves. I saw my chance and took it. I'm not just fighting for my dock, I said to the crowd. I'm fighting for all of us. Let's vote to dissolve the HOA board and start fresh. The vote was swift, the crowd's hands rising almost unanimously. Karen's face went white, her clipboard dropping to the ground. The HOA board was ousted, effective immediately. Neighbors cheered, some hugging, others shaking my hand. Karen stood frozen, then turned and walked away, her steps unsteady. I should have felt victorious, but the sight of my damaged boat tempered my relief. The fight had cost me, but it had cost Karen more. As the crowd dispersed, Mike clapped me on the shoulder. You did it, Tom. The lake's yours, and so's the community. I nodded, but my eyes were on the water, where the mist was lifting, revealing the lake's calm surface. Karen was gone, but the scars of her vendetta remained. That evening, I sat on my dock, the boat still tied despite its wounds. Sally and Jim joined me, bringing beers and stories of the HOA's past overreaches. We laughed, the tension of the day melting away. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming something bigger, our freedom Our community, our lake. I'd spent years alone, content with my quiet life, but now I saw the power of standing together. Karen's fall wasn't the end. It was a beginning. As the sun set, painting the lake gold, I felt a weight lift. The fight had changed me, and it had changed Lake Serene. The days after the HOA's collapse were a whirlwind. Neighbors met at my cabin, not to fight but to plan. We formed a new community council, one without clipboards or fines, focused on fairness and cooperation. Sally took the lead, her passion for her wildflower garden now fueling ideas for shared spaces, community gardens, open docks, even a small beach for kids. Jim offered his truck to haul supplies, his gruff exterior hiding a heart eager to rebuild. I stayed in the background, content to let others steer, but my lakefront ownership gave us leverage. The county had finalized the assessor's report, and my rights were undisputed. The lake was mine, but I didn't want to hoard it. I proposed opening the shoreline for community use, picnics, fishing, kayaking, as long as everyone respected the land. The cheers that followed were louder than any HOA gavel. Karen vanished from Lake Serene, her blazer and clipboard nowhere to be seen. Rumors swirled. She'd moved to another town, taken a job at a different HOA, or sworn off community boards altogether. I didn't care. Her absence was a relief, but her actions lingered in the scratches on my boat and the distrust she'd sown. Repairing the damage took time, not just to the boat, but to the community's spirit. We held barbecues, fixed docks together, and shared stories of the HOA's reign. Each gathering chipped away at the old divisions, replacing them with something stronger. I found myself smiling more, greeting neighbors I'd barely known before. My quiet life on the lake had transformed into something richer, connected. One evening, as I sanded down the scratches on my boat, a kid from down the road approached, shy but curious. "Can I fish here sometime?" he asked, eyeing the dock. I grinned, handing him a spare rod. "Anytime, kid. This lake's for all of us." His smile was worth more than any deed. That moment crystallized why I'd fought, not just for my rights, but for a place where a kid could cast a line without a permit. The lake glittered under the fading light, its surface a mirror of our new beginning. I realized I'd been wrong to think I could stay an island, detached from the community. Karen's challenge had forced me to see what I'd been missing. But not everything was perfect. Some neighbors, still wary from years of HOA control, hesitated to join our new council. A few even whispered about Karen, wondering if she'd try to come back. I doubted it. She burned too many bridges. Still, I kept the deeds locked in a safe, just in case. Mike, ever the pragmatist, suggested we hire a lawyer to draft new community guidelines, ones that protected everyone without suffocating them. We did, and the process was messy but honest. Arguments flared, but they were born of care, not control. By the end, we had a charter that felt like ours, not some faceless boards. The lakefront was its heart, a shared space where we could all breathe free. As summer faded, I stood on my dock, watching the first leaves fall into the lake. The boat was repaired, its hull smooth again, but I hadn't taken it out much. I was too busy with the council, with neighbors, with this new life I hadn't expected. Sally dropped by with a tray of cookies, her garden now a community project blooming with color. "You started this, Tom," she said, her eyes warm. I shook my head. We all did. The lake stretched out before us, its depths holding secrets and stories, but its surface was calm. I'd fought for this place, not just for me, but for everyone who called it home. And in that fight, I found something I hadn't known I needed, a community worth fighting for. Months passed, and Lake Serene felt alive again. The community council thrived, not with rules, but with ideas. We built a small pier for public use, funded by neighbors pitching in what they could. Kids fished off it, their laughter echoing across the water. I'd sit on my dock, watching them, my boat bobbing nearby like an old friend. The scars from Karen's vandalism were gone, but they'd left a mark on me, a reminder of how close we'd come to losing this. I'd always thought of myself as a loner, content with my cabin and the lake's quiet, But now I saw neighbors as more than faces passing by. They were people with stories, dreams, and battles of their own. The fight with the HOA had woven us together, and I was grateful for it. One crisp fall morning, I got a call from Mike. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice tinged with amusement. "Karen's back. Not here, but she's stirring up trouble at another lake community an hour away. Same playbook, finds, notices, the works." I laughed, shaking my head. Some people never learned. But her absence here was a victory, and her tactics wouldn't work on us again. We'd built something stronger than her clipboards and threats. That afternoon, I hosted a council meeting at my cabin, the table covered with plans for a winter festival on the lakefront. Sally sketched ideas for ice skating, Jim offered to haul logs for a bonfire, and the kid who'd asked to fish brought a drawing of a snowman contest. Their energy was infectious, and I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. But the past has a way of creeping back. One evening, as I locked up my cabin, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no address, just a single sheet inside, a photocopy of an old HOA regulation, highlighted with a note in Karen's handwriting. "You won't keep the lake forever." My pulse quickened. Was she back? Or was this someone else carrying her torch? I called Mike, who told me to ignore it. "She's fishing for a reaction," he said. "Don't bite." But I couldn't shake the unease. I walked to the dock, the lake dark and still, and burned the note, watching the ashes sink into the water. Karen was gone, but her shadow lingered, a reminder to stay vigilant. The winter festival became our answer. We poured our hearts into it, stringing lights along the pier, setting up a bonfire that glowed against the snow. Neighbors came together, sharing food, music, and stories. The kid from down the road won the snowman contest, his grin brighter than the fire. As I stood by the lake, watching the community I'd helped rebuild, I realized this was what I'd fought for, not just a dock or a deed, but a place where people could live free together. The lakefront wasn't mine alone anymore. It was ours, a shared heart beating with laughter and light. Karen's note felt like a distant memory, her threats powerless against what we'd built. I took my boat out the next morning, the lake glassy under a pale winter sky. The cold bit my fingers, but I didn't care. I rowed to the center, where the water was deepest, and let the boat drift. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened, the weight of the fight gone. The lake had always been my home, but now it was more a symbol of what we could do when we stood together. I didn't know if Karen would try again, but I knew we were ready. The community was no longer a collection of houses. It was a family, forged in the fire of that summer's battle. Spring arrived, and Lake Serene bloomed with new life. The community council grew stronger, its meetings now a mix of planning and laughter. We'd learned from the HOA's mistakes, keeping our rules simple: respect the land, respect each other. The lakefront was open to all, with docks for fishing, benches for quiet moments, and a small playground where kids chased each other under the trees. My cabin, once a solitary retreat, was now a hub, neighbors dropping by with ideas, or just a chat. I never thought I'd be this person, the guy organizing barbecues, teaching kids to bait a hook, but it fit me better than I'd expected. The lake had always been my anchor, but the people around it gave it meaning. One afternoon, Sally brought me a newspaper clipping from a nearby town where Karen had resurfaced. The headline read, "HOA President Faces Backlash Over Draconian Rules." I chuckled, handing it back. She never learns. Sally shook her head, her eyes soft. "But we did. You showed us how to fight, Tom." I shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. The fight hadn't been mine alone. It had been all of us, standing up for what was right. That evening, I walked to the dock, the lake shimmering under a pink sunset. My boat was tied securely, its hull gleaming like a badge of honor. I thought of Karen's last note, now just a memory, and realized it didn't scare me anymore. We'd built something she couldn't touch. The kid from down the road, now a regular at the dock, ran up, holding a fish he'd caught. "Look, Tom, my first one." His pride was contagious, and I ruffled his hair, showing him how to release it back into the lake. Plenty more where that came from, I said. He grinned, already casting again. Watching him, I saw the future of Lake Serene, not in deeds or docks, but in moments like this. We'd taken back our freedom, not just from the HOA, but from the fear of standing alone. I'd started this fight to save my boat, but I'd ended it with something far greater, a community that felt like home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the dock, the lake's gentle waves a quiet song. The battle with Karen had been a storm, but it had cleared the air, leaving us stronger. I didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but I knew we'd face them together. The lakefront was mine, but it belonged to all of us now, a place where anyone could cast a line, share a story, or simply sit and watch the water. I'd fought for my piece of this lake, but in doing so, I'd found my place among the people who called it home. The lake stretched out before me, endless and free, and I knew I'd never be alone again.